Okay, so this is the second demo video where we'll actually make a game, or at least the start of a game, rather than just sort of playing around with the cat like we did last time. Um, the game we're gonna make together here is just a sort of simple ball bouncing around the screen and us trying to maybe sort of hit it with a paddle. So I don't know. Back in the day, this was known as Breakout, but you probably played a game like it at some point, maybe on your phone or in an arcade. So um, Right. So I think it was called Pong, or way, way, way back in the day, even before my time. But um, so we're going to try to build that up, and I think the process by which we do this should be reasonably similar to the process in which you maybe are making your game, where we're going to just start with sort of the basic components, and then make sure that's working, and then add a little bit, and add a little bit, and add a little bit, and I think that's the way to go. I think if you kind of set out to do a baseball game where you're going to try to have a player have a pitcher throwing a ball and a bat and a player hitting it with a bat, that's fine. But to try to sort of jump in too deep at first is as with most things not a great idea. So um, just sort of tried to think about starting with one component and getting that the way you want it. And then, say, okay, now how do I make this a little bit better? Okay, now how do I make this a little bit better? What do I add? Do I add sound effects? Do I add, whatever. Um, and I think that's sort of the right approach. That way, if at any point you kind of get stuck, you've at least kind of accomplished, whatever you've been able to do up until then. And sometimes, and some things are just going to be sort of not too difficult to do, but too challenging probably in this time frame to do. And so you say, okay, well, I couldn't quite get that, but let me add this other feature that I think I can. Anyway, okay, so um, so first things first, we're going to say goodbye to the cat. So I'm going to delete the cat just by right clicking on the sprite, and so now I have no characters. Um, but this game is going to involve a bouncing ball that's going to sort of bounce all over the screen. So let me get that first. So I'm going to make a new sprite or get a new sprite. And I'm going to just choose it from the library because there's a million perfectly reasonable things in this sort of clip art thing that we have here. So feel free to use this stuff. It's probably in many ways mostly all you need. I mean, there's all kinds of stuff. I haven't looked at these things in a long time, but well, anyway, plenty of things to pick from. Um, so let me grab. I think I saw there were some balls. So we're gonna have a bouncing ball in our game. So as I'm just sort of looking through this basic menu here, I see like we could use a tennis ball. That looks kind of pixelated pretty badly. I might grab that beach ball that I saw in earlier on. So let me go back up to the top here. A beach ball would sort of bounce, I think. So I'm going to pick that as my character. So I'm just going to double click on it. And all right, so now the ball is in our story here. You can rename it, right? You can call it other things. Remember, that's under costumes. But if you want to call it something other than beach ball, call it something else. If you want to make some adjustments to it, Photoshop it, whatever you want to do with it, that's fine. But I'm just going to be happy with it as is, I think. Okay, so so this is the ball that's going to be bouncing around the screen. And I need to do that, right? So if I'm trying to create a game where that's a feature, I should at least get that working, I suppose. So how do I say bounce around the screen? Well, let's see. So I know I'm going to move, but unlike with the cat, and we were just sort of playing around, that wasn't really a program necessarily that we made before with the cat. It was maybe a component, or that was a good script of a character that would run and jump. Then that might be part of your game. But if I'm trying to really drive this whole thing, I want to say, all right, well, what do I want to happen? What do I want to have happen? to this ball, first I at least want to just sort of get it moving, but it needs to move continuously, right? In other words, I don't want to have to hit the arrow and things like that every time. I just want it to sort of flow, right? So one thing I can do is I can say, well, I mean, I know how to make it move, so I'll grab that, but I don't want to have to click it every time. So go over to the control again. Events and control are sort of your timing characters, and ask yourself, all right, well, what do I want to, when do I want this to move 10 steps or 10, 10 spaces? Well, I don't want to have to click on it. I want to do it right out. I kind of want to, I kind of feel like I want to do that forever. So why don't I grab this one that says forever? Oh, whoops. So grab that, pull it over here. And as you can see, right, things will fit in here. So if I grab this and plunk it in there, then I think the way I might read this is to say forever, move 10 steps. Okay, let's try that. So if I click on this, oops, I didn't mean to unclick it. So when a piece is lit up, that means it's doing it. In other words, it's executing it. So it's moving, but of course, what's happened to the ball is it's stuck, right? Because I didn't say what to do when you get to the edge, right? So let me turn this off for a minute. Let me grab this and pull it back. Right, so this is just going to say, okay, forever, that's good. It means keep doing it. Move, okay, that's good. But, right, it gets stuck. I need to say something like, well, okay, do that, but when you get to the edge, you should bounce. And fortunately, there's a feature that says if you get to the edge, bounce, right? So maybe it feels like I should grab that and put that in there. So if I grab that and put it in there, oh, well, already that's better, right? At least it's not stuck anymore. But of course, this is not the best game in the world because, the ball is never going to really do any sort of interesting maneuvers unless it maybe, it goes sort of diagonally more so than just left and right. So one way to do that might be to say, well, you know what, before you start doing this forever business, maybe a thing I should do is point it in a reasonable direction to start the game. So I'm going to grab this point in direction and put that sort of before I do the forever, the moving. Maybe I should start it sort of pointing diagonally up this way maybe. Right, so if that's 90 degrees, it reminds you, right, to the right is 90 and up is 0. It's a little bit sort of backwards as to how you might normally think of it. That's 0 and that's 90, which means diagonal I think would be 45. So why don't I type that in here? And this would say, all right, start by pointing it sort of diagonally, and then say, okay, now forever, move and bounce, move and bounce, move and bounce. That sounds a little bit better, right? So let me turn this off. Oh, I didn't need to do that whole thing. Sorry, stop, okay. So for the timing of when do I want this stuff to happen, I could just click on this and that would be fine. But another thing you might do, and just thinking about timing and everything, is that we should be working towards the idea that when I click this flag, that's going to represent starting your game or starting the process. So anything, and there might be more than one thing I want to have happen when the game starts, but that's not a bad idea to sort of get in the habit of saying, okay, if this, the start of these scripts should be all triggered by maybe the flag being clicked. So I'm going to grab this guy too and say, you know what, the script for the ball should start when I hit this. That's sort of saying, okay, everybody go, right? It's sort of like firing the, firing pistol at a race. It's saying, okay, we're on now, go. And that might be a nice way to say, okay, so when I click on the flag, point in the right direction or point, sort of diagonally, and then do your bouncing forever. All right, so now let's try that. So I'll pull him back to the middle of the screen here. And now I'll do it, right? So if I click the flag, that'll turn this whole thing on, and it should point it in this direction, and then do this. Okay, so that's pretty good, I think, right? And the bouncing is, now that's a feature that's built in, so of course I think it looks pretty good. it looks like a real bounce, right? It looks like the ball is bouncing off the sides. Again, if you really wanted to get fancy, you could create some images that would be, sort of the ball kind of decompressing and stuff. When it hits the wall, it sort of gets flat for a minute and then, whatever. But I mean, this is perfectly good, I think, in terms of the movement of the ball. Right. Okay. So that's nice. It's doing it forever. And it's going to start when the game starts. So that all sounds pretty good. Okay, so now the objective of this game is that I want to insert a like a paddle down here, a bar. That if you've played these sorts of games, I want to be able to move the bar left and right, basically, in order to bounce the ball off, because maybe I'm trying to hit things up here or whatever, right? So far, I don't have that yet. So, all right, so let me just stop that for now and say, all right, I need to insert the ability to have a paddle. Well, the paddle is going to be something I want to be able to control, probably maybe with the keyboard. So that's another sprite. So this is the ball sprite, but I need another character in my story. I need a paddle. So I'm gonna make that, right? Now a paddle, I think I can actually maybe just make via painting. I could grab a sprite from the library. There's probably sort of a rectangle sort of character, but just to sort of try to show you some of the other features, I might say, you know what, I'm going to actually just make my own. So I hit that. So paint your own sprite. I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to call it the paddle, because it's the paddle. And, oops, I didn't mean to do that. And then I think I can just get by maybe with just a simple rectangle, right? So maybe I'll make it a color like blue or something like that. And I think if I just pull this and drag it, and I think this will let me fill. Yeah. I get a paddle. Now, you can sort of judge for yourself. If you think it's too big, I can shrink it. I can make it a little bit smaller. And it might be a little bit big. Flip. Oh, okay. Maybe probably the easiest thing to do is I'll just erase some of it. Okay, so maybe about like that. Maybe that's a more reasonable size. Okay, and I think I'm pretty happy with my paddle, with my character here. So, all right. So I think I'm gonna go back to the script, and now I'm on the paddle, right? So now the paddle is the character that I'm writing the script for. All right. And as you can see, the script there's nothing, right? And if I want to go back to the beach ball, don't worry, it's still here, right? So this is still happening, right? But of course, it's it's going right through the paddle. So one thing I want to probably do is, write something that will simulate bouncing off the paddle. That's probably important. And also, I want to make sure that I can move the paddle, because right now, I'm hitting left and right, and we all want the paddle to move, but it isn't, of course. So, right. So I need to do a couple things, right? So first, sorry, the ball bouncing is annoying. So first, let me go back to the paddle for a minute here. I think that. Okay, I'm a little concerned that this is actually there. Let me just delete that for just a second. Let's just do that one more time. I think my terrible fix of just erasing was probably not the best idea. So let me just quickly make a new one that's a little more reasonable size. And let me fill it. Okay, I'm happier with that. All right, and I'll call this paddle. Okay, so back to the script. So I'll just pull him down here artificially for a minute. All right, so here's the here's the paddle script. So so what do I want this guy to do? Well, I think first things first, right? I certainly want to be able to move the paddle. So I'll just use the same idea that we used in the last one. Um, when I hit left or when I hit right, I want to move. So go back over here to move, right? And remember, the right is positive numbers and the left will be negative numbers. So change that to -10. All right, and now I think I can at least do that, right? So I'm hitting right and left, and I'm getting movement, so that's pretty good. You can make it faster or slower if you want to, but I'm pretty happy with that. Oh, I should say, I should be a good person here and say, as you're making your video, you probably do want to save periodically. I'm sorry, not your video, as you're making your game. So let me maybe let me do that. So if I go to File here and Save As, where do I have mine? On the desktop, right? I've got a little folder here for Scratch projects. That was our cat moving from last time. So I'm going to call this Pong, which is the name of this game. Maybe I'll call it Pong 1, because we'll have a couple versions of this as we add more features. Okay, so I'll hit save. All right, so I should be a good person and update that pretty regularly. So, all right, so I've got my paddle working. So now when I start the game, I kind of have the components, except I'd like that ball to bounce, of course, off the paddle rather than just go right through it. So I got to do something to make that happen too, don't I? So, all right, let me stop that and say, so what do I want to have happen? Well, I go back to the ball. Since it's the ball that I want to change, right? I mean, the paddle can move left and right, that's fine. And when the ball hits the paddle, I want to say bounce, basically. Right. So since the ball is the thing that has to do something different when it hits the paddle, I'm going to add to the script for the ball, not to the paddle, right? The paddles, this is really all the paddle needs to be able to do is go left and right. So, but it's the ball that needs to behave differently. So I might say, all right, so what is the ball currently doing? Well, it's moving and bouncing off the edges. That's all it's doing. But I want to maybe also add something in here that would say, all right, but if it's hitting the paddle, if it's touching the paddle or something like that, well, do something, right? Bounce off or change direction or something like that. Now, unfortunately, there's no, there was a built-in, if it hits the edges, bounce. But I don't have that same exact option for other objects. So I'm going to have to sort of engineer this, I think. But this is good practice. So, so while I'm doing things, right, one other thing I want to maybe ask, and remember, control and events are your sort of timing things. I also want to say, so do this forever. But I also want to know something like, if it's touching the paddle, right? If the ball is hitting the paddle, I want to do something. So for that, I want to grab one of these if statements here, right? So if, and as you can see, there's a little space here that's going to let us say, well, if what, right? So if something is true, remember the sort of hexagonal spaces like this are looking for a true false, like, if this is true, then do these things, all right? So what do I want to say here is I want to say if it's touching the paddle, so how do I do that? Well, one of the options here is sensing. Sensing is sort of are all these sorts of, or are many of these sorts of questions of, well, what's happening right now? And as you can see, touching is actually one of the primary things that you can sense for, is one thing touching another, and then you can, do stuff with it. So let's see. So right now I'm writing the script for the ball. So I might ask the question, is the ball touching the paddle? Right? So as you can see here, right, I have the option of asking. I don't know why this isn't called paddle. I changed the name to paddle. Oops. Okay, I don't know why it's not called. Usually it updates the the name over here, but I'm going to call it paddle here. Okay. Okay, there we go. Now it's called paddle. So I can ask, right, is it touching? So if I grab this one, oops, sorry, I'm in paddle. Sorry. So if the ball, if it's touching the paddle, I can ask that question. It even puts a question mark there. If I drop that in there, then this would be saying, if the ball, that's who I'm writing the script for right now, is the ball, is touching the paddle, then I can say, do some stuff, right? What I'd love to say here is bounce, I guess, basically, but unfortunately I don't really have that option. But one thing that I might want to do is maybe make a sound at least. That might be sort of neat, right? I know, and most games would have some sort of a sound effect for if you're bouncing, right, or touching, right? So how about I grab that at least? So I could say you have lots of options for things you might want to do. I don't know what this sounds like. Let's hit it and see what it does. Okay, I guess that's a cute sound, right? So I'll drag that. You can, I should say, with sound, you always have the option to record. And by record, this is just, it's going to ask you to find a audio file. So if you have music you want to put in here, or any specific sound effects, you can put them in. If you want to use sort of the standard stuff that's in here, there's many different instruments that you can pick from. I won't go through all of them, but well, anyway, lots of different instruments you could pick, and various pitches and lengths and all kinds of things. So anyway, play around with this, of course, as you see fit. But all right, so I've got this now. Out here, it's not active, right? So in fact, if I just do the usual, nothing's going to happen, even when it touches. I know I still didn't do the bounce, but nothing's happening, right? It's not because my volume's down. Why? Because as you might notice, this portion that I just added isn't illuminated, which means it's not actually happening. So a good sort of way of debugging, saying, well, gee, why isn't this working? Why am I not getting this pop sound? Well, this isn't linked up with the rest of the stuff. So instead, I might say, well, wait a minute. Let me add that to this. So to say, all right, move, and if you're on the edge, bounce. But also, if you happen to be touching the paddle, you should make this pop sound. So let me pull this up and drop it in there. And as you can tell, whenever the ball overlaps with the paddle, I get the pop sound. Now, that's not quite what I want still yet, but oh, that at least should, right, that at least signifies to us, oh, all right, it's detecting when it's touching the paddle. Yeah? So that's pretty good. All right, but now, so that's cute, I guess. But I do want to add the bouncing feature, right? All right, so if touching the paddle, maybe play the pop sound. That's cute. But also now I need to say bounce. All right. So how do I do that? Well, I have to kind of think, well, what should happen to the ball? It was actually funny that I stopped it right there, because what should happen to this ball right now, rather than going right through the paddle, is it should change directions, right? And in particular, I should maybe point it in a new direction, right? It probably doesn't matter what order you put these in. And just to sort of get at least some sense of this, let me say, all right, well, what direction should I point it in? Well, at least I should maybe sort of make it diagonal again. So since I started it pointing it to the upper right corner, maybe I'll do the same thing here. So let me just change that to 45. Okay, let's see what happens, right? A lot of this is just going to be trial and error anyway. So, so I'll click the flag to get us started again. Okay. So, not bad. Look, and even if I miss it, it's okay, right? It bounces off the floor, so to speak. But that looked pretty good. But how about ooh, right? How about ooh? All right. So one sort of human thing you might notice is that that's pretty good, right? I mean, I got the sound, I got the bounce. It doesn't go through it anymore. I mean, it's infinitely better than it was a second ago. But I don't. That's not quite realistic bouncing, is it? Because every time I bounce off, I shoot it. Right? What does this say? This says if you hit the paddle, point. Basically go in that direction now. Right? Well, that isn't quite right because look at this bounce. Right? That wasn't supposed to go to the right. That should probably bounce off and go to the left. Yeah? In fact, am I not sort of infinitely stuck right now, I think? Yeah? All right, so okay, right, that should go off to the left, not to the right. So I'll leave it, keep bouncing. So I think I need to be a little more clever with how I say turn around. That would be okay to turn in that direction if the ball was coming in from the right? So in other words, if the ball was doing this, I would want it to do that. But since the ball's doing this, I want it to sort of do that instead. Yeah? So, all right, it's driving me nuts now. So, all right, so I didn't quite nail this. So, all right, let me grab that. I guess I'll leave the sound in there. Well, I need to be able to detect, is the ball coming in from this, sort of going this direction, or is the ball going in this direction? So how do I do that? Well, again, go back to your control. What did I just say? I need to detect if it's coming in this way or this way, right? If, that's your big clue. So go back to the controls again. And we have these things that let us say, okay, if something is true, then do something. And now in this case, think about it for a second. I'm in one of two cases. Either the ball's coming in from the right, in which case I want to bounce to the left, or the ball's coming in from the left, in which case I want to bounce to the right. So if you can describe the situation as, well, on the one hand do this, but on the other hand do that, then this guy is more going to be our friend. So what does this guy say? This is similar to the one we just grabbed a second ago to say, are you touching the paddle? Or if you're touching the paddle, do stuff. This is also going to this will let us say, okay, if this is true, do this, but otherwise do this. So it's going to basically just say, instead of having one case, it's going to say, all right, if you have an either or situation, this is perfect for you. So what is it that I want to detect? I want to detect if you're coming in from the right, go left. If you're coming in from the left, go right. So go right means like it's been doing, right? What it's doing when it bounces is it's saying go to the 45-degree angle. In other words, go right. And if I come in from the right, I want to say go left. So the way to do that would be to say point negative 45 degrees. That should be to the upper left. Okay. But now I need to say, but when do I do these things, right? So I haven't said that yet, right? So I'm saying, on the one hand, if you're coming in from this, if you're coming in from this side, change the angle to 45 degrees. 45 degrees just means towards this corner. But if you're coming in from this side, change the angle to negative 45 degrees, which is this corner. Okay, so all I need to do here is to say, I need to describe what it means to come in from this side. Come in from this side. So now I know this isn't so easy to see because the ball doesn't have like a head, like the cat. We could sort of say, well, what direction is it facing and all that business. But remember, the path that it's moving in, the direction that the ball is moving, let me put it back in motion again, is the angle that it's facing. So it's always moving sort of forward regardless of what direction it is. So if I animate this again, okay, oh, I don't get the turnaround anymore, right? But the ball, don't pay attention to the bouncing. The ball, right, is depending on the direction it's moving. Actually, it does sort of rotate. You can see from the dots, right? But the direction it's moving, that is the angle it's facing. So when it's going this way, it's facing an angle towards the left. When it's coming this way, the direction it's pointing in is anywhere towards the right. Now remember, the orientation of the directions of this grid here says this is 0, this is 180, and anything over here, in other words, anything pointing anywhere towards the right, either up and to the right or just to the right or down and to the right, are all the numbers between 0 and 180. Anytime the ball is moving to the left, either up and to the left, directly to the left, or down and to the left, like it is right now, it has all of the angles from basically 180 to 360, or in this world, they're all of the negative numbers. So I think the way to detect whether the ball is moving towards the left or to the right, like it was just doing, is just to ask, is the direction it's going negative? That would mean going to the left. Or is it positive? That would mean going to the right. All right? So I think the one thing I want to check here is the direction of the ball positive or negative? So how do I do that, or how do I say any of that? So first, I'm going to need some math here, because I'm going to need to ask a question like, is the direction positive or negative? So math is all into this green stuff. And these options in here let you ask, is something bigger than something, or smaller than something, or equal to something? Okay, so let me grab this guy, and we'll assemble it over here. So what is it that I want to check? I want to check, is the direction of the ball positive or negative? Again, positive would mean it's moving to the right. Negative would mean it's moving to the left, like now. And now it's positive, and now it's negative. Okay. Right, so if I want to ask if something is positive or negative, I want to ask if it's less than 0 or if it's greater than 0, I guess, right? So now I want to do this if the object is moving to the right, which means the direction would be positive. Oops, so I grabbed the wrong one. So I want to know, here we go. So I want to check, is the direction of the ball positive? If it is, do this. Otherwise, do this. So how do I do that? Well, one of the options on motion is that you can always grab as a variable or as a quantity the either x position or the y position, or the direction of the ball is also a quantity that you have access to. So if I grab this and drag it, it'll let me, I hope, drop it in there. And I'm in the ball, right? I'm still writing the script for the ball. So this is the direction of the ball. If the direction of the ball is positive, so let me drop that in there. Sometimes I have to play with it a little bit. There it goes. So if the direction of the ball is positive, then shoot it this way. Otherwise, which would of course mean that it's negative, shoot it this way. So let's try that. Let's see if that does the trick. So I'm going to put it back in where it was before, right there. And let's see if it works. So I'm going to put my paddle back in here. Oh. So that, I think, kind of seems pretty good, right? That seems like a much more kind of authentic bounce. Right? So now, of course, right, if you played different games like this, sometimes you want to sort of say the motion of the paddle, like if you're sliding the paddle to the left or to the right, that would maybe put like some sort of spin on the ball. Okay, I mean, again, that's a more advanced feature, which you could certainly do, but I'm pretty happy with this. Yeah, so pretty good, right? Again, I don't know how many lines do I have here, about 10. I mean, it's not a crazy long or difficult thing, but that's pretty good, I think, right? All right, so what else do I want to add? Again, I think this is the best way to go about things. Well, so far this is still kind of the world's dumbest game, because what's the objective, right? First of all, the game could go on forever, right? I mean, it's never going to end. That's probably not good. And, shouldn't there be something else maybe changing, about the game? Let me just, and in particular, right, I mean, there's no difference between me actually getting the ball, which we would sort of interpret as probably a good thing, and me missing the ball, right? Nothing bad happens to me if I miss the ball. All right, so these are maybe the next logical questions is I should try to say, all right, what's the goal and how does the game change, right? So probably with a game like this, should be like a score or something, and maybe I get a point when I hit when it hits the paddle. Maybe I get a point, because I successfully hit it, and maybe when it hits the edge down here, when I miss it, maybe I should lose a point or something like that, right? These are natural things. And maybe when I get a certain number of points, I should move to like level 2 or something like that, which maybe has the ball moves faster in level 2, or maybe the paddle gets shorter or something like that, right? So just think about any game you played, right? And say, well, what naturally happens next? And then try to add it. All right, so let's try. So if I want the notion of a score, um, I need to make that happen. So if you need quantities or things that are not currently part of your game, right? I don't have score as an option or anything like that. If you hit data from the menu here, you can make a variable, and by variable, that just means a quantity that you might want to use. So if I hit that, it'll let me name the variable. So I'm going to call it score. And probably you want to make most variables for all sprites to have access to. So I hit OK. And notice it did a couple of things. One, it made a variable called score. Two, it actually displays it here on the screen. Now, you don't always necessarily want all your variables to be displayed, so you always have the option of unchecking it, which means you still have a variable called score. It's just that it's not being displayed. But actually, score is probably is something you want to display. So I'm pretty happy that popped up, right? Now from this, you have some limited but simple options of things you might want to do with your variables. So one thing I probably want to do, or that we just said I wanted to do, is maybe I should get a point, right? I should get a point every time I hit the ball. So I might want to change the score by 1. It's actually already set up perfectly for me. And now I just need to sort of ask myself, well, when do I want to do this? So obviously if I put it in the wrong place, bad things are going to happen. Like, for example, if I just sort of decide it should go there, well, look at my score. Look what's going to happen to my score. Okay, I'm just getting points all the time, right? Because look at where it is in my game here. It's here, right? Which is saying forever, get a point, move, bounce, right? So, well, that's not when I want to get a point, though, right? I don't want to get a point all the time. I just want to get a point when it hits the paddle. That's when I want to get a point, right? All right, so let me stop that. So I didn't quite put that in the right place. So let me pull it back out and say, all right, well, when should I get a point? Oh, I should get a point when it hits the paddle. So as long as I'm inside this if statement, I know this is sort of hard to see, but this guy right here, the if touching paddle, as long as I'm in there, it'll only happen when I hit the paddle, right? So I can drop it in probably anywhere. I could give myself the point at the beginning, or I could give myself the point at the end. It probably doesn't really matter. So let's just put it in there. Say, okay, get a point, and then play the pop sound. Now if I hit go, I'll just do it real quickly and then stop it. Notice that my score is 742. Why? Well, because that was my score when I stopped the game the last time. Well, that's probably not good either, right? So probably isn't it true that when I start the game, I should probably set the score to 0. So grab this piece too. And that I want to do just sort of at the very beginning, right? So when I start my game, reset the score to 0, point the direction, and then go. All right, now I think I'll be in better shape. So when I hit the flag, my score should go back down to 0. And now I think every time I get it, right, so now nothing's happening because I'm missing, so no points. But when I hit it, I get a point. And when I hit it again, I get another point. And if I miss it, I get no points, and so on and so on. Okay, so that's It's pretty good, right? So I'm getting points now, which is, not only is that much more realistic, it also now lets me say things like, okay, so maybe when your score gets to a certain level, um, something should happen in order to, make the game harder, or even just, change the background color or something, right? I want to maybe denote some sort of action, right? Okay, so let's see. Um, Maybe when the score gets to 5, let's say, I want to maybe make the ball move faster. That would be a good way of making the game harder. Yeah. So right now it's moving 10 steps every time. So if I want to say, you know what, when the score reaches 5, maybe that should be like 20 steps to make the ball move faster. Another thing you can do is maybe shrink the paddle, right? Change the paddle to a different costume. Um, that would be a smaller bar, right? You could do that. Anyway, variety of things you might do. Let's do the speed thing because that seems like a reasonable thing. Now, how do I do that? Well, so I want to say this shouldn't always be 10. Maybe instead of it being always 10, I should change this to a variable because, again, variables are going to, well, as the name suggests, be varied. So let me make a variable and let me call it speed because that's going to be like the speed of the ball, right? So I'll call it speed. Now, maybe speed is something I don't necessarily want displayed, although maybe while we're debugging I will. So, okay, I'll leave that. Again, most variables you probably need to set them to something when you start. So when I start the game, maybe it's 10, right? 10 is the sort of slow speed. So then maybe I'll set it to 10 when I get started. Okay. And then rather than having the number 10 here, I want to put my variable in there. So grab speed and plop it in. So what is this saying? So far nothing will be different, right? I'm going to set speed to 10 when I start, and then move speed steps each time. Well, that's just 10. So what did we say a minute ago is we said, well, you know what, when your score reaches 5, maybe I want to increase the speed to 20. So in other words, change speed to 20. Oh, okay. So I asked myself, all right, fine. So I want to detect something, when the speed or if the speed, or something like that. So either here, right, I could maybe see if there's something here that I might use. Not so much. But I can always do this with an if statement, I think. So if is the easiest way for us to ask, if something is true, then do something. So here I might grab this guy and say, okay, so if I want to check if the score is 5, then that's when I want to change the value of speed to maybe 20. Okay. So again, operators is where you grab your math, your easy sort of math symbols here. So you could say if the score is equal to 5, or maybe I'd say if the score is bigger than 5, or bigger than 4, maybe, to say when you reach 5. That seems like a good thing to say, right? So maybe I'll say if the score is more than 4, and again, if you say, oh, how do I do score? Remember, score was one of your variables, and that's here in data. And you can just drag it. So if your score is more than 4, I want to change, or I want to set the speed to 20. All right. Okay. Now, we're always going to have the question of where do I put this, or how do I link this up? So if I leave it out there, it's never going to be executed. Now, if I put it with its own flag character, the when flag is clicked, it's only ever going to do this once. In other words, it's only ever going to check this once, right? So a common thing people do that they're like, why doesn't this work? Is you say, okay, that I can grab it. And you can have as many of these as you want. So it's okay, when the flag is clicked, do this stuff, but also, sort of check that. But if I do that, the speed is 10. Now, even if I get up to 5, made it less than that. Nothing happened, right? The speed didn't go up. It's still 10. Let's stop it. And the reason is because this only happened for a brief moment. When I clicked the flag, it checked. Is the score more than 4? But no, the score was 0. So this never happened. Oh. So there's a couple ways you can resolve that. So either you can say, well, I don't want to just check this once. I want to check this continuously. So if I grab a forever and encase it in a forever, that should be okay. You can try to do like a repeat until sort of thing. That sometimes is useful. But I think in this case, maybe the forever is what I want to do. So I'm going to grab this, and you can just sort of play around with it. You can make it do where you want it to be. The other thing I can do is actually just grab this and throw it in with this stuff, right? I don't actually need a separate one. It just sort of, I don't know, felt like this was getting kind of cluttered, so I just thought I'd make a separate one over here. But you could grab this if and just put it in with these guys, and I think you'd be okay. All right, so let's try again. So back down to 0. Speed is 10. And look at the piece on the right. I can't. Here, I can pause it. Okay. Oh, yeah. Well, anyway. Okay. I think I got a few points there. It probably bounced. Yeah. Okay. Stop that. So let me start it again. So when the flag is clicked, both of these are going to light up because they're both doing. And since this is in a forever, it's going to keep checking. Is the score more than 4? Is the score more than 4? Is the score more than 4? Which is kind of what you want, right? So I think, right, so 1, 2, 3. This seems really slow now. 4, so hopefully when I get to 5, it's faster. And it is, right? And you can see it is. Now, one thing I'll say, okay, I'm just going to let it keep running. You do have probably a little bit of a glitchiness, which is that, see, right there, kind of when it hits the edges like that, you get extra points, right? Oh, there, did it again, right? So these are all going to be, okay, so these are the types of things. What's happening, right? Why am I getting, I think I was getting like 3 or 4 points. Well, this is where you're going to have to sort of play around with things. What's happening is that it's touching when do I get points is right here, right? So it's saying if it's touching the paddle, you get points, play the sound, turn the stuff around. Well, what's happening is that it's not turning around fast enough. And so it's still touching the paddle at the next time. And it takes a little bit of time, especially when the ball's moving faster, to bounce off. It's not leaping off of the paddle. It's sort of getting stuck there for a second. So there's some things you can do, and some of these are going to be the types of things that, if you have a little bit of glitchiness, it's not a tragedy. But one thing you can sometimes do, all I did there was I just moved the when do I get a point to the end of this thing. And the reason I did that is to say, well, if this thing is taking a second or two to execute, which it kind of is, or not really a second, but a split second or two, and I'm getting extra points, maybe putting it at the end, which should sort of be the last thing I do before I, jump out of this, that might help. So let's see. If I just click on this, I start over again. Whoops, I forgot. I should do the whole thing. Okay. Points. You're going to play your game so many times to get past the first level. Okay. So let me try to get an edge thing. So I'm still getting, what's happening is it's getting trapped and sort of touching the paddle for a while. I think it's a little bit better. Okay, it's better. It's still going to probably, I think I might have gotten 2 points there. It still might be a little glitchy, and there's some things you can do. Oh, yeah, there, I was still getting a couple points. You could try to move the ball, right? So in here, rather than just saying point it in a direction and letting it, wait to get up here to move, you could put in an extra move here, right? So if I put in an extra move 10 steps in each case here, it'll help to sort of, I don't know, eject it, I guess, from the paddle a little more quickly, which might help to sort of say, all right, get out, get move away from the paddle more quickly so that you don't get sort of stuck there. That might be a little bit better. Let's see if I can get it sort of stuck. Still got an extra point, maybe. Yeah. Okay, again, I think somewhat better. Oh, maybe I got 2 points there, but okay, if 2 points is, I mean, that's not the worst thing in the world. At least I'm not getting like 3 or 4 like I was. So anyway, well, these are things you can, again, try to adjust. Anyway, all right, so we got our sort of level 2 to happen, right? We got our ability to sort of detect, okay, the game should be harder now. You can do some other things in order to try to make it a little more magical. The background is something you can do. You can change the background maybe to a different color when you get to level 2, so to speak. So you can, let's see. So first, I didn't actually do any sort of backgrounds, did I? So let's say we start. Oh, I don't know. What seems like a good background? Maybe just sort of the sky. Oh, blue is probably a bad color. Well, actually, rather than picking a color, let me get rid of that. Why don't I just sort of paint it, right? Because it's just going to be, if I'm just going to make it a solid color anyway. Let me grab, be like this yellow color. So that could sort of be level 1. In fact, I could even, put some text in the corner here that says, no, the font has to be black. Level 1, right? Okay. Oh, okay. Right? And so when I start, that's where I am. I'm in backdrop 1, or I could call it level 1. But then maybe when I get to level 2, when I get the 5 points, I wanted to go to a different color in the background. So if I make a new one, I could paint this one, I think. Maybe I switch to a different color. Let me pick some other pale color like purple maybe. I'll fill in purple background. And I'll call this level 2. Grab the text. Right. So now I have to do timing though, right? Because right now it's just saying, I mean, even though I called it level 1 and level 2, it doesn't know when to do level 1 and when to do level 2, right? So if I go back, in the background, right? So sorry. So here we are. Here we were with our sprites, right? The background is sort of also a sprite. It doesn't have exactly the same motion. I mean, you can't move the background and things like that, but you can still do some of the other things, like detecting when to do stuff. So when I think I want to grab that when I start the game, right? I want to switch to level 1, right? Okay, and then I want to maybe check, keep checking. Oops. Okay, yeah, actually, that's fine. So forever then, check if the score is equal, what did I say? It was greater than, is that what we're using? If the score is greater than 4, drop that in there. That's when I want to switch to backdrop 2. Right? And I'll just show you one more thing. If my game is only going to have two levels, which probably yours might have more, depending on how intricate they are. I'm writing a script for the background right now, so I'm saying when you start, go to the level 1 background, and then keep checking. And when the score gets to be 5 or more, right, more than 4, switch to level 2 background, the purple one. But then I'm done with this, right? I mean, this doesn't need to keep running and checking. Is the score more than 4? Is the score more than... Once this happens, I'm all done, right? So one thing you might sometimes need to do or want to do is say stop something. In other words, turn something off. So the stop is a feature that you can grab, and you have options here. You could say stop everything, which would sort of be your game over moment, I guess. Or just stop this thing. So I think I just might want to say, if the score reaches 4, switch to the purple, but don't keep doing things with the background, right? The background's done. I mean, the rest of the game will keep going. All right? So let's see if we pulled that all together. So when the flag is clicked, I should go back to level 1 screen, and I should have a score of 0 and a speed of 10. Let's see. Okay, that's good, right? So it's on the yellow. I'm getting my points. And I switch to the purple, and the ball goes faster. Good, right? So that's pretty good. So just that's, I mean, that took some thinking and whatnot, but that's a pretty good way of, just doing a simple level up, right? That didn't take all that much more time. And yet now the game, again, is much, 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 much more interesting. I guess one other thing maybe just to add in here is I probably should have some sort of penalty, right? There should be some sort of bad thing that happens to me. And of course that should maybe happen when the ball misses the paddle, right? So one thing I might want to detect is to say, when the ball hits the, I don't know what you want to call this, sort of the edge down here, maybe I could lose a point. Maybe I lose a life, right? Maybe this is a game where I only have 3 lives, and if I mess up 3 times, I want to trigger some sort of game over thing to happen. So let's just throw that in, and then we'll call it a day for this video. All right. So how about a sort of a lives feature, right? So let me make a variable for that. I'll call it lives. And that probably, again, I'm probably okay with that being displayed. Maybe I don't really need the speed to be displayed anymore. And if you're unhappy with the space there, you can just move this. All right, so great. So I've got a variable called lives. I probably want to set lives to a certain number when I start the game. And I don't know how many lives we want to give ourselves. I'll just say 2 maybe, so that it doesn't take forever to die. And okay, so I'm going to start with 2 lives. And now I need to say, what happens if, how do I lose a life, right? So let's see. So how do I detect if I'm, if I lose a life? Well, notice something. I'll animate the game again here. Ooh, I meant to stop it there. It wasn't quite where I wanted to stop. How am I going to detect, sort of hitting the bottom? Well, there's a variety of things you could do. I could put a little border here, right? Because we're pretty good with detecting, is it touching the paddle, right? So I could make a little border here and call it like floor or something, just a long black line, I guess. And I could ask, if you're touching the floor, lose a point. I could probably do that in a similar way we did this. But I think there might even be a sort of cuter way of doing this, which is to say, well, the ball right? When the ball is moving, remember, all objects have an x and a y component. So for it to be touching the ground, it would have to be sort of at the minimum possible distance, I guess, or minimum possible y position. So I'll let this go again and see if you can see how low it goes. I'll stop it real quick. That wasn't great. Let me move the paddle way out of the way here. Right. So it sort of goes, maybe I got it actually, right? And oh, right. If you want to know where is something, it's always displayed here in the corner. So right now the ball is at a y value of negative 146. Now I think you can probably move it. Well, it never gets that low. But maybe you move it to like negative 150, maybe is the lowest it gets before it bounces. I'm not sure. Maybe that is it, actually. Maybe I might have actually gotten it just perfect. So maybe when it reaches negative 148, I could say that means I'm hitting the floor, so that means I should lose a life. So let's try that. We might have to fool around with this a little bit. So let's see. You could put this anywhere you want. I could maybe throw it into this one. They're both sort of inside of forever statements. So I guess I'll maybe throw it over here just because it sort of looks a little lonelier. There's less things going on over here. So I want to check if the y position of the ball maybe reaches negative 148. I think that's where it was maybe. That should mean lose a point. I'm sorry, lose a life. So let's see. So I want to say if. So I'll grab an if again. So I'll throw that in there. So let's see, if, and if I want to check for some math stuff here, I'll say if the y position is equal to negative, let's try 148. And here I want to say, let's see, so it's the ball and it's the y position. So remember, that's always an option under the motion. I don't know why it's under motion, but I can grab that and say, drop that in. So if the y position reaches negative 148, that should trigger lose a point, lose a life, right? So I want to change lives by negative 1, right? So in other words, say lose 1, okay? So let's try and see what happens. Move the ball away so I don't lose a life immediately. And let's see. Okay, so I bounce. Okay, so let me not get this one. See if I lose a life. Okay, I didn't, right? Which probably means it doesn't quite get that low. So maybe whatever, I had stopped it before. You have to do a little bit of trial and error here. Let me try 140. Nope. Okay, so it doesn't get that low either. 130. Okay. Oh, now I've got a million points for no reason. All right. 10. Oh, maybe it doesn't like the equals. Oh, okay. Sorry. It jumps when it moves in position, right? It actually sort of jumps quite a bit. It doesn't actually hit every single possible number. So sorry, we probably had the range correct, but I should use a less than maybe instead in order to say you don't actually have to hit these numbers precisely, but if you just get sort of under them, then that means you're on the wall there. Okay, so maybe if y position is less than, what was the original ones, like 170? Let's try that. All right, let me start over again. No, still don't get that low. Let's try 160. Oh, okay, that was too much. I lost a whole bunch of lives. 165. No. Okay. Somewhere in between, I guess. 62. When I did 160. No. Okay. Isn't that kind of about there? Oh, maybe it's more like, oh, it's 140 something. Sorry. 145 maybe? Okay. There we go. Lose one, lose one. Lose one, lose one. Okay, now I think we got it. Sorry, I was looking at the cursor instead of the where the ball was. Okay, so that seems pretty good, right? Every time it bounces off the floor, I lose one life. So that's probably a good thing. And then maybe I want to do a sort of game over situation, right? Which would probably be something like when lives are zero. Maybe I want, so I'm going to go back to the backgrounds for a minute here and say for the backgrounds, for the backdrops here, I might say, let me grab sort of the game over one, which I need a new one. So I'm going to make a new paint here. And since it's very sad, I'll fill this all with black, I guess. And I'll maybe do some sort of game over message. So let me grab some text. Maybe I'll put it in the middle of the screen. And maybe I'll do red. Game over. Okay. And I'll call this game over thing. Okay, so that maybe is what I'll show on the screen is my game over message. But now again, I have to think about the timing. So if I go back to the script for the backgrounds, so remember this was one we did earlier, we said start on level 1. If you get to level 2, go to the level 2 thing, and then we said don't do anything else. But now I don't really want to do that anymore because I want to also now check, are we at a game over or not, right? So I might say, all right, now I also want to check, right, so throw this in here. If, what is that, lives, if you have 0 lives, so operators, so if your lives is 0, drop that in there, then I want to switch, so go back to looks, switch backdrop to game over. What does this say? Oh, wait, I don't want to do that. So just switch background to game over. And now, since the game is over, right, I do want to stop, so I shouldn't have gotten rid of that thing. Where was that control? Right, stop. I want to stop all. Because the game's over, right? So I was going to stop everything. Stop all will stop the sprites. It'll stop, the ball won't keep bouncing and all that stuff. Okay? So let's see if we got it. So. Okay, so I've done something wrong. Oh, whoops, sorry. This, the stop all shouldn't be there, right? Okay, I'll pretend that I did that on purpose, but actually I just effed it up. Right, so why did nothing happen, more or less, is because this is saying start at backdrop 1 and then keep checking. Is your score more than 4? Well, it isn't. Check, do you have no lives? No, I have lives, I have 2. But then it said stop all. Right, so okay, so I didn't need to put it there, right? I should only do that if I'm in this situation. Do I want to stop everything? Okay. pretend I did that on purpose, but all right, so let's try again. So I'll go back to the beach ball here. All right, so I'm playing, I'm having a good time, but maybe I miss one. So I'm down to 1 life, and then I miss a second ball, and so game over. Now, it did stop everything, but you might